different disease process.
Is it recording? Is it good?
It is. We're good.
This
Might
is
have to
like
cut out my
our old
conversation.
COVID quarantine days.
This is true.
Yeah.
All right.
Real
Well,
cool.
we've got Kate joining us from CrossFit down in Ann Arbor, doing some testing and stuff. So we're gonna round table this and ask some questions, talk about it, and
For sure.
Yeah,
We're
round
having
table.
a good time. We're just gonna chat, and then we have guest speaker Rocky here. Just a member of CrossFit. This is what's
I don't know what I got myself into.
I'm just here. Just here.
He's here for the
I'm
long
driving
haul.
For sure. So I just got some questions here that were posed by the members, but also members of the coaching staff as well. But so I don't know if you want to like start with Kate or just whoever wants to answer the question.
Yeah,
We
I
can
think
kind of
give
bounce off
Kate the
each other.
first one, and then, or like give the first go at them, and then we can add to it if it sounds like we should.
Totally. So first question: why should I care about burning fats as fuel versus carbohydrate?
So when I'm analyzing a report,
Yeah.
I use the word fat and oxygen interchangeably, and carbohydrates and carbon dioxide interchangeably. And so although we say we want to burn fat as fuel, but like I'd rather burn carbohydrates because can't I just eat ice cream and then burn them off, right? Because when you're burning fat, you're using oxygen. And so if we look at the chart, when your body looks at something as sustainable, meaning you're bringing in oxygen and we're breathing easily, it's going to give you the fat that you have stored on your body and a fuel source that it can make. So you can make that via ketones from your liver and all these other processes. So when you're moving sustainably where your body thinks you can continue doing something, it gives you fat to use. Carbohydrates have to be replaced. You can't make them yourself. So if you're burning carbohydrates for energy, yes, it'll pull the glycogen out of your muscles. It'll burn anything that you have consumed. So I think about that with marathon runners, the ones that you hit an aid station and you eat a banana, and it's like, ooh, all these fast carbs, your body's gonna burn through them, but then it's going to need more. When you have to use a fuel source that you're pulling from either muscle stores or something else, you have to replace them. So when you do a workout, when you're burning all carbohydrates and not using oxygen efficiently, your body has to go into recovery mode. So you're going to have inflammation and fatigue and soreness, and you're going to crave to replace all of those things. I joke all the time with like, have you ever done one of those workouts and then you go home and you're like, man, I worked out really hard. I deserve to eat 5 pizzas for dinner because I'm starving. I must have burned a lot of calories. Like you may have burned a lot of calories, but really your body's just trying to replace all the fuel that it burned that it can't make itself. So it wasn't overly sustainable. So it ends up just being a circle of inefficient doom.
The never
Inefficient
ending circle.
doom,
Yeah.
right.
So I think we kind of answered, but like, how would that help someone's performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So if, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, the game becomes figuring out where you're using oxygen efficiently. So where you're burning fat and your body looks at as sustainable. How heavy, how skilled, how fast can you be? So then it means like, how strong are you to be able to? So if say you're, efficient up to 130 beats, can you do everything you want to do at 130 beats? And it kind of depends. Can you row at 130 beats? Probably. Is it as fast as you want it to be? Maybe not. Then it's something that you need to manipulate with showing your body that like, I want to row at 2 minutes per 500, but my heart rate's at 160 for that. So that's why you guys program in a lot of that work to rest work, a lot of the volume training, and teaching yourself to become more efficient back where your body looks at it as sustainable. And the same thing goes for weight training or skills, gymnastics, pull-ups, and all that kind of stuff.
Going back real quick to the carbs versus fats, and then just if this is correct, so if you're burning fats and then carbs and then they're gone, it's kind of like you've burned them there, but then what's your body doing the rest of the day? Versus when you start burning fats, your body continues to burn fat. So that'd be correct, like throughout the day, once you get that as your fuel source, would that be correct in thinking that way?
Eventually, yeah. So before we do, I can do RMR testing as well. And this is an interesting thing. Before Pinoe did RMR testing, so resting metabolic rate testing, which you can get a ton of good info on. You can find out, really people looked at it like, oh, then I know how many calories I need per day, so then you can figure out what you need for macros. When I first started doing these education sessions, I'm like, hey, all of us sitting here are burning fat at rest, right? Because we're breathing easy and our body looks at it as sustainable. When I started testing, I found that no, that is not true. That some people's systems are stressed out at rest. And I mean, think about, I mean, a lot of us, because of lives outside of, you know, the gym, and you think about how stressed out you are, you know, is your sleep on point? Is your nutrition on point? Do you feel amazing at all times? I had one client come in, you sit in a chair, and you wear the mask for 10 minutes, and you just breathe easy, right? And his fat burn was something like 30% at rest, meaning he couldn't even sit still and use all the oxygen that he had. His body was holding on to all the fat that it could be using. Now, sometimes I find that, and then we can get a speed of your metabolism, right? And I asked him, I was like, you know, why would this be? His metabolism was like not very high, and he's holding on to all this fat. And he goes, to be completely honest, I'm not healthy right now. And it doesn't feel good to sit in this chair. He's like, it's kind of hard just to sit down and breathe easy. You know, but his like nutrition was off, he wasn't sleeping very well, he was really stressed out in life, and that shows. So then if I take somebody who at rest is stressed out and throw them into, you know, a workout, even if during the workout their body's like, yeah, this feels good, eventually it will compound, and then you'll start seeing, you know, systemic changes, like what we talked about with Vaughn. You know, he had this great test, and he's like, now I want to hit all these other goals, and it wasn't necessarily getting more skilled or strong or faster. It was, I want to change my body composition. And so he did it in a way that stressed him out too much. And so then his aerobic system suffered because he didn't have the fuel to be able to continue to maintain that capacity of work.
And that's kind of interesting, because the next question here is, what happens when my body is overstressed?
Yeah, so it's that, it will hold on to fat. So fat runs our vital life functions, brain, hormones, all that kind of stuff. If you are so stressed out, then your body will hold on to that fat. I noticed it with a client that I had during Ramadan. And so during Ramadan, he had to fast all day. And he would lose a lot of weight, obviously, but we would test, you know, before and after. And he was an amazing fat adapted client. And then afterwards, when we test his RMR, we would see that everything had slowed down. I remember him talking to me, and he's like, I'm craving carbs. I want carbs. He wanted a quarter cup of oatmeal, and like, you may have a quarter cup of oatmeal. Like, really?
Oh my gosh.
But what it was is his body switched over to not burning fat, because it's like, we may never get food again, and we need fat to function like in our brain and hormones and everything else. So we'll hold on to that. And then it will make you crave fuel to use right now. You know, and it's that idea of, because it's burning through, it's going to hold on to all the fat. So that's why you see these people and you're like, wow, you're like an overfat person, not healthy, but like people that undereat do this all the time. And it's like, metabolism is an interesting thing, that it will meet you where you are. And so say, you know, I eat 1,000 calories a day, but I need 2,000 calories a day. I may have initial weight loss just because my body's still humming along, but eventually it's like, oh, we're only gonna get 1,000 calories? Cool. And then you'll be able to function at that 1,000 calories. Now the risks come into then, if I'm only getting 1,000 calories, and then I'm going and working out and burning them, because there is something about calories in, calories out, right? But then I'm going in and burning them, and I'm stressing out my body. It's holding on to the fat because I have to live. And I don't have that fuel, so my metabolism is going to slow all the way down, and my fire is not going to be burning. Eventually you'll be sitting and it's like, I'm not even going to bother going to the gym today. Like, I just don't care anymore. Or you come in and you're like, I don't know. You know, and it's like the mental part of it. Because your body's holding on to the fat to, you know, move your brain, you'll be foggy, you'll be tired. You know.
I appreciate you saying that. I had a conversation exactly with the client saying near the same thing. They go like, what do I do? I'm like, you need to eat a little bit more food than you are to have your energy and have your brain function, because they weren't thinking positively at all.
My favorite client, I tell the story all the time, comes to me. She had kids, they finally hit teenagedom where they're doing their own thing. She developed a super successful business, had several offices, managing everything. Everything was starting to calm down, like her life was even. And she looks down and she's like, wow, I'm really out of shape. And this is a woman that played college basketball, so she was always used to being an athlete, and she kind of rode that through for a long time. Well, then she decides, like, I'm out of shape, I'm just gonna join the, you know, the local wellness center and run. And so she would go every day and run her full heart out. And nothing happened. And she's like, why am I not getting into shape? Why am I still holding body fat? So she started with me, and I take her in and we do all these tests. the most interesting thing was her resting test. And so her metabolism speed was nothing. It was slow. And although her fat burn was decent, like it was, I don't know, 70-30 fat to carbs at rest. And then her exercise report was X, Y, and Z. Like she had to work at 130 beats, let's say, for her aerobic zone. But this is a woman that's used to like super high intensity, high heart rate. And so we start chatting and I'm like, how many calories do you eat in a day? Now this is a 6 foot tall, 200-pound woman. Eating 1,000 calories a day, and she's and she's like, well, women are supposed to be dainty. She's not supposed to go back for seconds. And I'm like, okay, like I don't mean this in any bad way, but you're the size of a man.
Yes.
So you need to be eating
a tall
twice
man.
the calories, right? And she was an athlete, so think about the quantity of muscle she has,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Like your structure holds it. So I told her, and I can't believe she listened to me. This is one of those like, I was like, you need to eat twice as much food, and you need to slow down and work only at 130 beats. Could you imagine coming in after?
So you need to eat more, and then you need to slow your.
You need to walk and eat twice as much. And she was like, how? Right? She did though.
Good
Like
for her.
she did because
Yeah.
you know it's one of those things. Well, what was what you doing before working? You know, why are you paying me all this money? Like, trust me. But we watched, and you look across, and it took her a year. She lost like 20 solid pounds of body fat.
Yeah.
Just the body fat. Her percentage of body fat went from 30% something to 20% in a year. And so one of the things we did is we brought her in, and yeah, we made her move really slow, but we also taught her how to lift weights to get those muscles back. Now, there is something about her, you know, her training age and her capacity and everything. So when she started lifting and prioritizing protein, she said her kids used to make fun of her because she's like, we started like talking about protein, like, oh, mom's got to get her protein in, you know. But then it was like, but that helped her build muscle, and so she started building muscle, and then that's where it comes into like the number on the scale. Like we have an in-body, so we could see that the body fat was going down. Her weight itself didn't. I mean, I think she lost in total 15 pounds. But I guarantee when she came into me the first time, she probably thought like, I need to lose 50 pounds. I don't remember what it was, but like.
But you saw that fat go way down, but then the muscles like.
Yeah,
the
and the
exact
muscle,
opposite.
and it didn't like, it wasn't, I mean, because she's a woman, right? So there's hormones and stuff, and there is something about like how she builds and everything else, and testosterone and blah, blah, blah. Her muscle mass did go up, but her fat mass came down, so the percentages, the ratios of what she was, and she was just getting to the point of like, she was learning how to snatch, like, she was cleaning and, you know, like, lifting and deadlifting and squatting. She couldn't squat to a box when she first came in. Like,
As an ex-basketball player, that is
right?
Right.
They don't need to squat, right?
no, they don't.
Just shuffle.
You need to jump. You need to
That's
jump.
where you go.
need to go
Yeah,
up.
not down, go up.
Right? And so it was one of those things like retraining all that and then setting her up for where she was now. Like she really just wanted to be healthy, but she also wanted to look good.
Yeah.
You know, and making her to the point where she could come in and train for 2 hours a day if she cared to. So
So we're kind of talking about like food, increasing food intake, training at a lower heart rate, redefining that. Like, what if somebody trains like in the wrong zone? Like, you define what the zone is. Like, that's a great, kind, nice recommendation, and then they just like blow it. Like, kind of like what happens in that instance?
well, if we tell you, you know, you have to work out around 130 beats.
Yeah.
But you come in every day and you work out 150 beats, where you're not efficient. You know, you're not using, maybe you're using a little bit of oxygen, but mostly it's a carbohydrate burn. Yeah, you're burning all sorts of calories. You look up on the thing and it's like, cool, I burned a lot.
Yeah.
You risk injury, fatigue, burnout. Those are the same people that when you burn all those carbohydrates, your body has to recover. Now, if every single thing in your life is in alignment, your nutrition is on point, you sleep really well, you don't have high stress, like your life is perfect and you come in and do that, eventually you will become efficient in those areas. And I can tell people that when I look at their charts and you see like maybe a little adaptation beyond, like where you're not efficient, but you have a little bit of fat usage. And you can kind of tell that with your athletes in here where suddenly it's like some of them can work really high. And although like it should be all out, they're actually doing okay, and you stop moving and the heart rate starts to recover a little bit. We have the ability with metabolic testing to see where you are efficient to make it that much more efficient to be efficient. So the catch is nobody lives in a vacuum though. So if you come in and you're supposed to work under 140 call stop, zone 2 goes to 130, zone 4 goes to 140, but you come in every single day at 155 to 175, miraculously you don't get injured. And those are the people that then are like, man, this was fun, I'm gonna go do spinning. I'm gonna go do this. And it's like, it's so stressful in their body mentally, they may not even realize the burnout, but those are the people that are like, I'm gonna go do something else and something else, and they gym hop. You know, it's what so very often happens with Orange Theory. Do you know anybody that's done Orange Theory for as long as most people have done CrossFit?
Yeah.
Right? Like maybe some,
Sure.
but you know,
member of Orange Theory.
you know, have they reached all their goals? And I mean, and I can pick something like Orange Theory, F45, all of those apart too. They're not progressive, so they're never meant to sustain, right? They're not doing anything. There's now progressive programming or cyclical programming because they're growth models, because their people don't stay. So you go in and you might see really good gains and have a whole bunch of fun, but eventually puzzles do something else. And that's a sign that people don't think about when you're working too hard. You don't make that connection of like, your body's telling you, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah. So what would it look like if somebody is really good at training in their zones? When it's a zone 2, they are keeping it low. When it's a zone 4, they are pushing themselves, versus somebody who comes in and it's a zone 2, but we're on a high zone 2, we're into the 3, or we're in a 4 and we're like hanging still in that one.
Like that little kid that like pushes every single boundary.
Yes. So what might be the difference in the attitude?
Like you told me to sit down.
Yeah, exactly. I am. Exactly. What might the difference look like in those two athletes or people?
I mean, it goes in the same thing of as long as they're doing a pretty good job, they versus a very good job, they obviously put themselves more at risk again for injury, burnout, and fatigue, and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to see progression nearly as well. We noticed this when we first brought in, you know, Ticker training into the CrossFit gym. And we had people that are like, this isn't CrossFit, like, and I would tell them when I coached, I'm like, you guys can full CrossFit this. Drop-ins were my favorite, because they had no idea. And being downtown Ann Arbor, we got a lot of drop-ins, and I remember they would come and they'd look at us as we're like all casually biking and chatting, and they're like, you know, dying over there. And they finish their workout and they're laying there, and we're all like happily skipping around and like cleaning up our weights.
Look at the dumb guy.
Right?
You okay?
But we had some that sometimes the programming is good enough that you can not really follow the rules but be forced into the rules. They'll still see results, but eventually they'll be surpassed by the ones that do a really good job. In anything that you do more, obviously you get better at. So if you're like, man, it sucks to have to work at 120, I want to work at 130. You can spend all your time being the valedictorian of working at 120, and then within a month, your body will catch up and you'll be, you know, strong and skilled and fast at 120. Then you look at it like, maybe now I can work at 130. And so then you can kind of get that. And, you know, we do it by testing again. You know, and it's like, if it's something, if 120 is like, we're looking at you and you're like, man, like, your movement's really cleaned up, you're looking really strong, you know, you're feeling really good, the attitude, like you can see, I see it often with like the color in people's faces. Wow. You know, and like when they're working out, are they able to maintain easily? And it's like, maybe it's time for another test. Maybe your zones have changed. And we've seen zones go, like Vaughn's a great example, right? Like we've seen zones go from like, you gotta sit at 120, and then you do a month worth of really good work, and you're like, yeah, I actually feel good, you're right, I sleep better, and I'm not craving burritos, and you know, we test, and it's like, holy, like smokes, dude, now you can work at 150. You know, and then if he didn't, say he worked at 140 in a month, he may be able to work at like 145.
Sure.
You know, you won't see that progression, but he also wouldn't have all the lifestyle stuff that comes along with it.
So we've talked a lot about like Gen Pop, which is great. So like, what if someone wants to be a competitor, like maybe say Joe, who was talking to us earlier, like he's got a pretty good aerobic base now, like is this kind of made for that person, or should they, like, you know, culturally we want them to fit in, but like should that person fly in the gym, or like how would that kind of work in this?
Competition is an interesting thing. So we train every day, and everybody really needs to be training for life. I mean, that's like my philosophy is we come into the gym to better our lives. So training should better our lives outside of the gym. We compete for fun. Like some people love competitions, and it should be fun. And you should go into a competition knowing I am doing nothing else for myself but enjoying it. And then we test to make sure that our training is working. And so if I take somebody that comes to me and they're like, you know, I got into this X amount of years ago and I really want to start doing these competitions, then that needs to be a conversation of like, where are you actually at? How strong are you? Where are your skills? Where are your endurance? You know, we were talking about Noah Olson and his, you know, he had a Whoop out reading of his heart rate during some intense WOD and it was like 145. Now we don't know what that looks like for him because everyone's heart rates are individual. But it's one of those like, and we also don't know the intent of the workout. You know, was he testing something? Was he testing this burpees and thrusters thing? Or was he training? You know, 145, let's pretend he's like any of us, and 145 is a relatively aerobic effort. But we were saying like, man, he was going really fast. Well, as an athlete, he's trained himself to efficiently have tension and skill and explosive power. You know, heavy skilled fast again, where he's probably relatively aerobic. And when he trains that, it just becomes the game of, again, like how good can you be? So a competitor then needs to be able to do the majority of their training where they're building up that strength and that skill and that speed. So when you do compete and you don't care about anything but getting into those top zones, that you're not overstressed when you get to that point. That you can handle it. Because if you think about, I mean, every CrossFit competition that I know of, it's not like you go in and do one WOD. You know, rarely do you go in and we're like, we're gonna do Fran this weekend, you know, here pay $100 in 2 minutes and it's over, right?
Flash sale.
You know, so you're gonna have to have that endurance. Well, if you're using oxygen and fat and your body looks at it as like this weekend event is enduring, CrossFit Games are how many days?
5,
6?
See a rest day put in there.
You know, and you think about that, like those guys have to endure the intensity and volume over several days. You know, we train here an hour a day. You know, that's not, you can endure an hour. And that's something interesting that you'll start to find is, you know, once you get really good at an hour, you know, you can come in and do, and this is what happened at our gym. We got these people that got really good in an hour and doing incredible amounts of volume. Like, what is the actual volume of your workout today with all those dubs and wall balls?
You started 100.
Started 100, then we did 80,
Probably close to
200, I said over 300.
Yeah.
Right.
In
So
one
you
line.
think about in 1 hour you did all that volume, and if
Yeah.
you left and you're like, that felt good, I've now recovered and want to do another one, like that's building that endurance.
Yeah.
So someone like a competitor can come in and do something at high intensity because they can handle the volume, because it's probably not going to be 300 reps.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't a competition workout. You know, it's probably going to be 21-15-9. They're going to do that, but they've trained themselves to do 300. Their body's going to respond not in another way.
Right.
Well, that was pretty sustainable. Then you go back into rest, and then you come in and do the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Yeah, same with your volume and even higher, again, like we talked about on the weight. Okay, you can snatch 200 pounds, great. So when you hit that 100 pound snatch, that feels pretty
Modest.
efficient, right? I can do that for a longer time because I've trained at that
Right.
higher amount.
So competitors need to have that base too, just because they need to build up the endurance in whatever they're trying to do. You know, whether or not it's just holding their body under tension for, you know, who knows what. Think about the marathon row from a few years ago.
Right.
Think about just holding position and sitting on a rower that long.
2.5 hours.
Like, all your muscles have to be on, right? And I
Yeah,
tell people all
all of
the
them.
time of like, you know, this is your core and this is your core.
Yes.
It's all in the core of your body. So if you don't have endurance to be able to keep those muscles functioning, like, how long are you gonna make it? I remember the first time I rode a 5K, I didn't make it. My back hurt. Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that I was using the wrong muscles, I just wasn't used to moving in one steady state for that long. You know, and I've done since then several 10Ks and everything else. It's like time under tension. So it matters for competitors in that way. And then there's nervous system readiness, and then there's all sorts of other stuff that come in from, you know, when you come down to competition day. One of my old clients who used to compete, he goes, I'm 4 weeks away from being ready for anything.
That's fun.
So if he had something big coming up, the open or a comp or something, he'd be like, all right, I've got this coming up in a month. And, you know, and we would look at, because often they tell you, you know, we look at what movements are going to come up. We'd make sure, like, Now you gotta make sure you're drinking extra water and you're sleeping and stuff like that. And let's look at where your weights are so we're not surprised by anything. You know, if you think about a month seems like a long time. Say you train 5 days a week, that's 20 workouts. That's it. That's all you got before your count. You better be ready for that.
Yeah.
And you better know how to handle the volume and not to like kill yourself a week before and not being able to recover.
Sure. What about just like medications? And that's a very broad topic. Like, how does that kind of affect our heart rate for one, and two, as like trainers or members? Like, what should we understand like about medications in affecting our heart rate?
Yeah, I just did a study of beta blockers. Beta blockers are
I
interesting.
think that was actually a specific medication that someone asked about. Like, well, how does a beta blocker actually?
Yep.
Yeah.
Beta blockers are really interesting. I can send you a picture of what it does. So beta blockers keep your heart rate low, like the stress low in your heart.
Yeah.
And so I noticed the people I can guess are on a beta blocker before. Now we asked as part of the survey, but we didn't.
Sure.
And your heart rate stays really, 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 really low. You don't necessarily burn all oxygen just because your heart rate's low doesn't mean that, you know, it is what it would be otherwise. So I had a client that did a test before he was on them, and then he had heart surgery and came back and now takes them for life. Once his heart rate goes up, it just like everyone else, it
Just goes.
but the reason he takes beta blockers is a different reason than maybe somebody else. But yeah, his heart rate is lower, but that's why we test. You know, much like we found people today were efficient up to 170. You know, those are the people that are like, I have a special heart. You might. Like, your heart rate just might be high. There's outliers on any, like, if you map out the grid, there's always people outside. Just like I knew of a games level athlete that was efficient at 113 beats. But you know what he could do at 113 beats? It was stunning. Right? It was
Like a lot of stuff.
walk, right? Like he crossed over at 130. That was the end. But his, you know, everything that he did was way lower. And on the other side of it, like stimulants, you know, like ADHD medication that potentially raise your heart rate. You know, or I mean, it's the same as adrenaline. Like it kind of depends on where your resting is, but that's why we test, so we know. Because not everyone's heart rate's the same. Having medications, you know, that is refer to your doctor and what's safe and whatnot. But with beta blockers, I notice it just stays lower and more steady. It's controlled for a longer period of time. It just depends why you take them and what you should be doing.
But you noticed like a difference of fat burning versus
No.
very much the same as far as that goes.
Because it really just affects the heart rate
Yeah.
versus the metabolic response.
Gotcha.
And this is just a curiosity question between kind of trainers. Like, the longer that you get in this game, like, do you have more conversation with your clients, like them as like the go-between, and doctors in the medical field? Like, hey, like, have your client do this in training sessions, so then when they go to the doctor, they test differently, or they get better results when they go see that doctor the second time, the third time, the fourth time. You know what I mean? Like, having kind of closing the gap between fitness and the medical professional doctoral field. You know what I mean?
I had this conversation the other day, and I had 2 clients come to me with really aggressive goals. Like, really aggressive goals. And we sat them down and we're like, okay, so, you know, you can have primary goals and then long-term goals and everything else. And we have those conversations and we're like, this is what it's gonna take to hit that first goal. Like, it's something like, this is a big deal. And then this is what it's gonna take to hit that year-long goal, right? And we do the education and we set the program, and I was telling Kelly, I'm like, the hardest part of my job is I don't do the work. Like, I can write the program, I can support you, I can tell you all the things, but it's on her to do the work. She has to trust me and that I know what I'm talking about. And so the same thing, like, doctor tells you you're pre-diabetic and you're at risk for a heart attack. You know, you should start exercising. That client comes to you and you're like, I'm pre-diabetic and I'm at risk for a heart attack. I take these medications, and you're like, all right, so we're gonna test you, and this is what I'm gonna do to help make you healthy. And, you know, they have to trust you that you know what you're doing, but it's on them to make those choices to do it. You know, so then it comes into like, you know, you can take them apart and be like, coming in here and doing sprints every day is not actually gonna get you to your goal. That's why we use all the testing that we have, and that's why we use progressive programming, where we pre-test and we train and we post-test so we can show and change improvement. Every so often, I'll pre-test we'll train and we'll post test and nobody gets better. And then it's on me.
Yes.
Because then it's like, what did I do?
Yep.
You know, this didn't work. You know, what is missing in this programming? And this is stuff that people don't see the back end of, like how much we as coaches put into every single thing that we come in. It's not just a magic pick workouts, like things out of the hat.
I walked in, there's just a workout on the board.
Like, I don't know what happened.
Like, I don't know how I got there. Wow. I've got a person I'm working with pretty closely, and they go get some tests from the doctor, and we get some positive results, and things are really great.
Yeah.
And then they go see other people, and go, you need to lose more weight. Like, this person's lost a significant amount of weight in a year, and what you're asking or telling them to do in the next 6 months is very unrealistic.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and that person is obviously caught in the crosshairs. You need to relax, stick to the plan, see what's up.
Eat twice as much food and walk on the treadmill.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But that's what it comes into.
Yes.
But that's what I tell them is like, what were you doing before? Did it work? You know, why are you paying me? You pay me a significant amount of money because of my, you know, background and
Knowledge.
expertise and knowledge and everything else, but you're the one that has to do the work.
Right?
So I think that's the last question I had, but anything else from anyone here?
I think we started kind of talking about it a little bit, like Chris just hit on it with like the weight loss, because a lot of people think, oh, I need to have a super hard workout to be able to lose more weight.
So
So
everybody
I hear that a lot from a lot of people, not just in this gym, but I work in the health field. So like a lot of people I work with, and a lot of people that a lot of patients I see, they all think that it's like, no, I need to go as hard as I can, and I can't do CrossFit because that's too hard.
I gotta go hard, but not that hard.
But
That's
so it's like, wait, and I can't work out because I gotta go too hard. It's like, wait a minute.
It's Andrew
Right.
running on the treadmill.
Right.
In everybody that tested got a health report. And at the last page of this health report is a chart. And on that chart, it shows all of your heart rates, and it shows volume of oxygen and everything else. And then in there, it shows calories burned per hour. And then next to that column, there's a percentage fat and a percentage carb. So everything we've learned about like using fat as fuel, burns it off your body uses oxygen, it's more sustainable. Think about it just in you're a raw numbers person. Calories of fat are worth 9 calories per gram, and then carbs are 4. So fat's really expensive as well, right? And so in there, and I use this all the time, like yes, working out harder burns more calories. Now, let's say your 130 is 80% fat and 20% carbs, and you burn, I don't know, 500 calories an hour. And then you look up and let's say your 160 is 20% carbs and 20% fat and 80% carbs, and you burn 578 calories an hour. You can go for a nice, enjoyable, hour-long anything at 130, or at 160, you're gonna feel it at the end.
Yeah.
You're gonna be tired, you're gonna be sore, maybe you can't come the next day. Was it worth 78 calories? You know, I told the client that yesterday. I was like, it was a difference of 100 calories.
Is it worth an apple?
And-
Is it worth an apple?
And you feel like you have to probably refuel more,
Way more
at
than
that.
a half an
Because
apple.
you're
Probably gonna have those cravings.
So your
of
body's
that
gonna be
carbohydrate.
like, we just worked at 160 for an hour, like we deserve ice cream, right? And so then you put it in and you undo everything you just
And
did
then
if
some.
you're trying, if body composition is a goal. And so that's something, and I've done tons of tests where we do things on, like, I had a client row, I don't remember what he was rowing, it was some interval, and he had to have a mask on, and he had to stay under 0.8, so he had to stay in the 0.7s. And then we recorded distance maybe. And then he had to do it where he stayed in the 0.8s, and we recorded distance, and then he had to do it where he was in 0.9 and 1.0, which is all carbs and stress. And the difference in the total was something like 500 meters. But then it was like, how bad did he feel? And in the end, he's like, I don't want to redo this again. You know, I don't want to have to. And it's like, yeah, and you went 500 more meters. You didn't actually go that far.
Right.
Quarter mile.
But for body composition, yeah, it is hard because it is calories in, calories out. But, and I keep saying this, there's so much more. We spend, what, an hour a day in here? Like, there is something about that stupid thing of like abs are made in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly, oh, yeah.
and in the bedroom, and like while you walk around, like you're awake for a lot of hours in a day. Like,
Yeah. Doing something.
Yeah.
And if they're in the gym an hour a day, I think it's like 4% of your time in 24, and they expect you to work a miracle. It's like, wait a minute, it's really on you.
And that's again,
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I'm trusting you to do all
Yes.
the work for weight loss. Like, you can't, I hate 100-calorie snack packs, right? And so people often ask me, like, what should I eat?
I have 5.
You know, here I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna burn fat. And, you know, we're doing this whole thing to burn fat, so I don't have fat on my body, and I don't wanna burn carbs, and carbs are evil. Carbs are not evil, we need
Not.
carbohydrates in life,
Yes.
right?
Very
Like,
function.
there is something as long as they're whole real foods, and then they're like, well, how many calories should I eat a day? And I'm like, I have never once in my life counted calories.
Yeah.
Like, as long as you're eating whole real foods and you know what makes you feel good, you will then eventually, you know, feel good enough to, you know, your body will go into whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's so many genetic components come in that.
Absolutely.
We're kind of like winding things down, but like, is there any imparting words of advice or something that you want the universe to know? 'Cause this is gonna go out. I just gave you like, you know, all the power, but, you know.
No, I don't think so.
Cool. Thanks for all showing up. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Done.
Done.
Nobody checked to see if that was working.
I know it did.